I am Ariana, 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I have been many things: a quiet achiever, a reluctant provider, the one who never quite fit the glossy family portrait. If you had asked anyone at last night's graduation party who really held this family together, you would have heard my mother's polished voice or my stepmother's shrill laugh echoing through the penthouse. No one would have pointed to me, quietly blending in by the marble kitchen island, making sure the lights stayed on and the bills got paid. Yet, for the past 3 years, every check that kept this family afloat has cleared because of me. There is a certain irony to holding all the keys, but always being asked to wait outside. Let me take you back. Before the live streams and the viral clips, before the public humiliation, to a time when I still believed loyalty meant something, when I thought family was a shield, not a sword. My family is nothing if not a hierarchy. At the top stands my stepmother, Victoria, a woman whose pearls shine brighter than her compassion. Below her, my father, fragile and tired. A man who once made headlines for his real estate empire, but now struggles with creditors and memories that don't pay the mortgage. My younger sister, Sophie, just 23 and fresh from her Ivy League graduation, is the golden child. Her smile graces every group photo. Her achievements are celebrated with champagne and press releases. And then there's me, Ariana, the in-between, the one who filled out the FAFSA forms alone, who learned to manage escrow accounts before her 25th birthday, and who took night shifts at the tech startup to pay her own tuition while Sophie was flown across the world for summer art residencies. My father always said, "You're responsible, Ari. You'll find a way." He never quite noticed the sacrifices, but perhaps that is what made them pure. The pattern began early. I was 9 years old, the first time I realized birthdays were optional. My own was forgotten in the rush of Sophie's ballet recital. No cake, no presents, just a hasty apology as the door slammed behind a flurry of costumes and hairpins. At 16, when I was named valedictorian, my family left my graduation early for a charity gala hosted by Victoria's investment club. "We've heard your speech in practice," she said, air kissing my cheek as I clutched the medal in my trembling hand. "Do be a dear and lock up when you're done." By college, it was clear that family investments followed only one direction. My tuition checks bounced while Sophie's came straight from a family account managed by Victoria. I swallowed my pride and took out loans, picking up every side job that came my way. There were nights when I would count coins under the flickering kitchen light, wondering how long I could keep pretending everything was fine. "You know how it is, Ari," Victoria once said, sipping her imported wine. "We have to prioritize where it matters most. Sophie's education is an investment, yours is, well, you're practical. You'll manage." Still, I gave. When father's company fell apart 2 years ago, it was me, not the golden child, who sat with lawyers and sifted through foreclosure letters. I was the one who negotiated the settlement that kept our penthouse safe, even if it meant putting the deed in my own name just for tax purposes. As they insisted, I covered $1.6 million in family debt. Quietly. Not once did I ask for a word of thanks. When Sophie's tuition came up short, I wired $42,000. Without a second thought. No one asked how I could afford it. No one wondered why. They just nodded and murmured about a lucky inheritance from a distant cousin. I should have known. In this family, help was expected, especially from me. Gratitude wasn't. Despite the slights, I kept showing up. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe the faint hope that love could be earned. But as Sophie's graduation approached, I began to sense a change. The invitations to family dinners grew colder. The compliments more forced. Victoria's friends would glance at me as if I were the help. Father withdrew. His eyes clouded with worry and something like regret. Only Sophie remained kind, though her kindness was often drowned out by the clamor of the rest. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, or wondered whether your loyalty would ever be rewarded, you'll understand why I stayed as long as I did. What I didn't know was that the graduation party, this glittering celebration of Sophie's achievement, would be the night everything changed. I had no idea the betrayal waiting behind those double doors, or that my quiet resilience would soon become the only shield I had left. As the string quartet played and the city lights shimmered outside the penthouse windows, I could not have imagined that the world I'd sacrificed to build would be stripped away in a single ROG. Public moment. If you want to know how a family can turn on its own, how a hidden strength can become a weapon, stay with me. The real story begins at the moment of greatest humiliation. There are certain moments in life that arrive quietly, almost politely, before they upend everything you thought you knew. For me, it was the gentle clink of crystal glasses and the soft click of a phone camera as guests gathered for Sophie's graduation party, a scene that should have been the height of family pride. Instead, it became the stage for my undoing. The penthouse sparkled under golden lights, guests drifting from terrace to ballroom, each one eager to toast Sophie's future. I had arrived early, as always, ensuring the caterers had access, that the AV system for the live stream was flawless, that every bottle of champagne was properly chilled. Sophie, radiant in her emerald gown, was the picture of promise. I stood at the edge, watching her twirl beneath the chandelier, her laughter rising above the music. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe this was enough, a quiet pride in the shadows. No spotlight necessary, but family secrets. I've learned. Never stay buried for long. It started with a toast. Victoria, stepmother and self-proclaimed family matriarch, raised her glass. To Sophie, she said, her voice carrying across the marble floor, whose brilliance and determination have brought honor to our family. Applause followed, warm and genuine. She paused, eyes glinting as she looked directly at me. And to those who support from the sidelines, she continued, her tone sharpening, who remember that true greatness means knowing when to step aside. There was a ripple of nervous laughter, but the words hung heavy. I felt more than a few eyes slide my way. Uncertain, almost pitying. I smiled tightly, swallowing the humiliation. But my hands trembled just the same. It did not end there. Later that night, as the party reached its height, I found myself surrounded Victoria, flanked by two of her oldest friends, corners me near the balcony doors. Her voice was low, but carried with the force of a hammer. Ariana, she began, it's time you stopped clinging to what isn't yours. This is Sophie's moment. Sophie's home. You're a guest here now. I think it's best if you pack your things tonight. He blinked. Sure, I'd misheard. Behind her, a camera phone caught the scene. The live stream continuing, hundreds of eyes watching from screens across the city, across the country. I forced myself to breathe. Excuse me, I managed. My voice calm, almost gentle. But Victoria's smile was ice. You heard me. You've lived here long enough. You're not family anymore, not in the way that matters. The penthouse. The accounts. Even the utilities. You're just holding them for us. We'll be taking it all back now. For a moment, there was only the rush of blood in my ears. Then the whispers began, guests murmuring behind their glasses. A ripple of embarrassment. I could almost taste. The cameras didn't stop. Someone, maybe one of Sophie's friends, zoomed in on my face. Hungry for drama. Oblivious to the pain behind my steady gaze. If you've never been shamed in public, let me tell you, it's a cold thing. Humiliation. It isn't just the words, but the knowledge that you've been judged and found wanting by the people you've given everything to. The room blurred, the laughter seemed sharper, more pointed. I stood my ground, refusing to let the tears fall. Very well, Victoria, I said softly. If that's your wish. The words tasted like iron, but I made myself meet her gaze. Her lips curled. It's not a wish, Ariana. It's a necessity. Some people just don't know when to leave. A few guests looked uncomfortable. Most simply watched, eager to see the drama unfold. It was, after all, a story to tell. I turned, gathering what little dignity remained, and walked toward my room. Behind me, Victoria's voice floated after. Don't forget to leave the keys on the counter. In my room, I found Sophie waiting. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling as she pressed a thick envelope into my palm. Take this, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. It's the contract. Escrow. The title. I saw what she did. Ariana. I'm sorry. For a heartbeat, I considered collapsing, letting the sorrow consume me. Instead, I squeezed her hand. You have nothing to apologize for, I told her, voice steadier than I felt. Thank you for telling me. By the time I finished packing just 2 suitcases and a lifetime of disappointments, the party had dwindled, the music dying down to a distant echo. As I rolled my bags down the marble hallway, I caught a glimpse of Victoria's friends on their phones, already posting. The humiliation wasn't contained to the penthouse, it was racing through TikTok, Twitter, every channel that loves a public fall. If you've ever watched your world shrink in a matter of hours, you'll know there is a strange freedom that follows. Walking away wasn't defeat. It was the first true act of power I'd claimed in years. I stepped out onto the city street, head high, the night air sharp in my lungs. I had no idea yet how deep the betrayal ran, or that the envelope Sophie handed me would become the key to everything that came next. If you've ever lost everything you thought you needed, only to discover something far more powerful in its place, stay with me. The reckoning was just beginning. It is one thing to lose your home in a moment of public humiliation. It is another to realize, in the quiet aftermath, just how little your sacrifice ever truly mattered to those you called family. I spent that first night at a cheap hotel, the city's neon lights flickering across a ceiling that wasn't mine. My suitcase sat unopened on the floor, and Sophie's envelope rested like a lead weight on the nightstand. Sleep was a stranger. But as dawn crept over the skyline, I opened the packet. Inside, neat and precise, were copies of escrow agreements, property titles, and bank statements, documents I'd signed over the years, thinking I was only protecting what little my family had left. It wasn't until I reached the final few pages that the truth began to unravel. Tucked in with the paperwork was a set of wire transfer receipts, each stamped with Victoria's signature. Over $1,000 $1 had been funneled from the family accounts in the past 18 months, hidden in small increments, filtered through shell corporations, all carefully designed to avoid detection. For a moment, I just stared. Betrayal is a slow burn. It seeps in, thick and suffocating, until it settles behind your eyes. But clarity followed quickly. This wasn't just a family dispute, it was fraud. And the law, for once, was on my side. I called my attorney, a sharp, unflappable woman named Lydia Chen, who had handled my startup's legal affairs in the past. She listened, silent, except for the sound of her pen scribbling across a pad. "You have the original escrow, and your name's still on the title?" she asked. I confirmed. Lydia's tone shifted, more focused, almost eager. "You need to come in today. And Ariana, don't contact anyone in the family. Not yet." The law firm's office was a world apart from the chaos of the penthouse. Lydia and her team reviewed the evidence, eyes narrowing as the story took shape. "This is more than mismanagement," Lydia explained. "Victoria committed clear violations: embezzlement, misappropriation of family assets, potentially even wire fraud if she moved funds across state lines." Her words were cool, clinical, but I felt a strange comfort in the professionalism. Here, at least, I was seen for what I truly was: not a burden, not a leech, but the rightful steward of all they had tried to steal. By midday, Lydia had filed a formal injunction with the court, freezing every account tied to the penthouse, the investment fund, and the family trust. "Victoria won't be able to touch a single cent, not until the investigation is over," she assured me. "Let them try to run the household now." I left the office with my head a little higher, clutching the paperwork as if it were armor. That afternoon, Victoria's first move was predictable. She called, left voicemail after voicemail, her tone swinging from indignation to panic. "How dare you?" she demanded in one message. "You think you can freeze us out after everything we've done for you? This isn't over. Ariana, you'll regret this." Regret. The word felt almost funny, echoing off years of silent service and invisible sacrifice. I deleted the voicemails, blocking her number. Instead, I focused on the one person who had always shown quiet loyalty: Sophie. She texted, simply, "Are you okay? I'm sorry. Let me know if you need anything." For the first time in years, I let myself reply honestly, "Thank you. You did the right thing." But Victoria wasn't content to fight in the courts. She took to social media, painting herself as the victim of a greedy, ungrateful stepchild. Friends and distant relatives, most of whom had never lifted a finger to help during the hard times, suddenly appeared in the comments, offering sympathy and scorn. Some posted clips from the graduation party, the moment of my public shaming, edited to make me look cold and unfeeling. It stung. Of course. I won't pretend it didn't. To be turned into the villain in your own story is a special kind of pain. But I had something stronger than public opinion: the truth. The bank statements, the escrow documents, the law itself. I forwarded everything to Lydia, who began assembling a timeline, gathering witness statements, and preparing for the inevitable counterattack. The days that followed were a blur of depositions, phone calls, and emails, Reporters began to circle, hungry for the next viral scandal. Some reached out to me directly, most I ignored. I had no desire to add more fuel to the fire. My focus was singular: protect what was left, and see justice served. In the meantime, the city felt different. Without the constant pull of family duty, I found myself wandering new neighborhoods, rediscovering old cafes and favorite bookshops. The loneliness was sharp, but it came with a sense of freedom, a clarity I hadn't felt since childhood. If you've ever faced a reckoning, you know that the hardest battles are fought in silence. But step by step, I began to rebuild first my courage, then my future. What I didn't know was that the showdown was only beginning. Sometimes, family is just another word for opponent, and sometimes, the strongest revenge is living in the truth. No matter how loudly the world tries to drown you out. It's a peculiar thing, watching a family unravel not in private, where wounds can heal and pride can hide, but in the unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. In the days following the injunction, the city's rumor mill churned faster than ever. TikTok clips of my exile from the penthouse racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Strangers debated my character in the comments. Some saw me as a calculating usurper, others as a scapegoat finally standing up for herself. But nobody, outside of Sophie, knew the whole story. Victoria, desperate to regain control, doubled down. She held another family gathering, a smaller affair this time, but just as performative. She invited old friends and local business partners, eager to prove she still belonged at the top. Word reached me through Sophie, who asked quietly if I planned to attend. "You don't owe them anything," she said. But I knew this was the moment to reclaim my narrative. I arrived at the penthouse in the late afternoon, escorted by Lydia, my attorney. For the first time, I felt no hesitation pressing the elevator button. The place looked different, tension in the air, forced laughter bouncing off the glass and marble. Victoria greeted me with her familiar, frosted smile, but her eyes darted nervously to the guests. "Ariana, so glad you could join us," she said, her voice as brittle as spun sugar. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We have some matters to clarify," I replied, voice steady. I handed Lydia the stack of documents, the wire transfers, the escrow agreement, the statements that told the story Victoria had tried so hard to bury. Lydia, efficient as ever, called for everyone's attention. "As some of you may know, there have been allegations regarding the management of the family's assets." She paused just long enough for the tension to grow thick. "Tonight, with Ariana's consent, we will clarify the facts." Ahush fell. Victoria shifted from foot to foot, then tried to interject. "This isn't the time." "Not in front of," but Lydia continued, projecting a video file from her laptop onto the living room's massive television. It was a recording Sophie had retrieved, a private conversation between Victoria and a family accountant, discussing how to siphon money from the trust. The words were unmistakable. "She'll never notice," Victoria said, her tone dismissive. "Ariana just signs the paperwork. This house was never hers. We're only keeping her around until we can get it back." A gasp from the crowd. Someone's wine glass shattered on the floor. Victoria turned white, then red, sputtering excuses. That's taken out of context." But Lydia pressed on. "The courts have already reviewed this evidence. Effective immediately. Victoria is stripped of all authority over family assets. Ariana retains full legal control." Any attempt to further access funds will be considered contempt. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, as if on cue, old business associates began murmuring apologies. A few guests slipped away, shaking their heads. Sophie stood at my side, her hand on my shoulder. The only warmth in a suddenly cold room. But the consequences did not stop there. News spread quickly, first through the guests' social media, then to the city's business press, and finally, in national headlines. New York heiress exposes step mother's $1 million embezzlement. Hashtags supporting me trended online. Victoria's face became a symbol of greed and deceit. Even friends who had once sided with her fell silent, distancing themselves from the scandal. Victoria's downfall was swift. The bank froze her personal accounts. Her charity boards quietly removed her name from the roster. People she once considered allies now crossed the street to avoid her. She called me at first to threaten, then to beg. Please, Ariana, let's keep this in the family. You don't understand what this will do to us. But I did. I understood perfectly. Some wounds must be brought into the light, if only to remind us that family, without trust, is just a word. The penthouse, once so full of noise and pride, stood quiet that evening. I walked through its rooms, not as a guest, but as the sole rightful owner. Every photograph, every marble surface, seemed to glow with the relief of truth finally spoken aloud. If you've ever watched a bully lose their audience, you know the silence that follows is sweeter than any applause. For years, I had been the afterthought, the one who kept things afloat but was never truly welcome. Now, with the truth revealed, the old order collapsed, leaving only what I chose to build from its ruins. But the story was not over. Justice can feel hollow if it ends in isolation. As I looked out over the city lights, I wondered what comes after revenge. Once you've reclaimed your voice and your power, that answer, as I soon learned, lay not in what I'd lost, but in what I was finally free to create. There are victories that arrive quietly, with little more than a sigh of relief. And there are victories that echo, reverberating through every bone, every memory, every wound you've ever nursed in silence. Mine was the second kind. In the days after the revelation, the world moved fast. The authorities completed their review. Lydia handled the press, her calm professionalism shielding me from the worst of the media's curiosity. Bankers and lawyers I'd never met before sent apologetic emails. My inbox filled with messages, some sympathetic, some venomous, all reminding me that privacy is a luxury few get to keep after a public family scandal. Still, the story was clear. Victoria's actions were no longer rumor, they were fact. Documented, judged, and punished. For years, I had tried to hold the family together. I'd believed against all evidence that my loyalty would buy me love. Or, at the very least, gratitude. But with the contracts executed, the assets frozen, and the legal wrangling complete, I saw that what I had really purchased was freedom. Not just for myself, but for the truth. Victoria faded from the penthouse and from my life. She called twice after the court's ruling, once to scream, once to weep. The voicemails sat untouched. I listened to neither. The past no longer dictated my future. My father left the city, returning to his childhood home in Maine. Whether out of shame or relief, I never found out. Our relationship, always a tangle of duty and disappointment, was left to rest. And Sophie, my little sister, the golden child, the only one who had ever reached out with genuine kindness, she remained. In the aftermath, she came to me, her diploma still crisp, her eyes still red from the strain of family war. We stood in the empty kitchen, the marble counters bare, sunlight warming the space that had so recently been filled with guests and gossip. "I don't want any of it," she said quietly, placing her share of the inheritance on the table. "Not if it means turning into them." For a long time, we simply existed together, two survivors in a home that no longer felt haunted. We ordered takeout, repainted the library a pale blue, and set new routines. In the absence of family chaos, a kind of peace crept in. But peace is not purpose. It's only the beginning. The first decision was the hardest to let go. I had the legal right to the penthouse, the funds, even the family company if I wanted. But the truth is, wealth built on pain can never truly belong to you. So I met with Lydia and with my financial advisors. Together, we made a plan, one that would turn the last of my burdens into something useful. Within a month, I sold the penthouse $13 million. All told, the family's remaining shares in the trust were liquidated. The assets divided as the law required. My share, and Sophie's, I placed in a newly founded charitable organization, the Chosen Family Fund. Its purpose was simple: to provide grants and support for people, often young adults, who had been betrayed, abandoned, or cut off by their own blood. People like me. And, if she was honest, like Sophie, too. The paperwork was thick, the process slow, but it was work that made sense. Work that healed. I spent my days meeting with social workers, organizing fundraising events, learning the ropes of nonprofit management. It was nothing like my old job in tech, and everything I never knew I needed. I also found, slowly, that I was not as alone as I'd always believed. There were friends from the past, college roommates, old colleagues, even a few distant cousins who reached out with gentle notes, words of encouragement, invitations to coffee. Some apologized for not seeing the truth sooner. Others simply said, "I'm glad you're free." I built a new circle, not bound by blood or history, but by choice and care. Sunday brunches in the park, late-night movies on battered couches, real laughter echoing in rooms that had never known such ease. One afternoon, as autumn painted the city gold, Sophie joined me at a Chosen Family Fund event. We stood side by side, listening as a young woman shared her story of survival after being forced from her home. Sophie squeezed my hand. "This is what matters, Ari," she whispered. "This is what family really is." I nodded, the ache in my chest less a wound now, more a memory. "We get to choose now," I replied. "That's all I ever wanted." Of course, Victoria did not disappear quietly. In the weeks that followed, she tried everything. Dramatic interviews, even threats of civil suits. But with the evidence laid bare, the courts unmoved, and the world having found new scandals to chase, her power dwindled. A few tabloids tried to revive her as a cautionary tale. More often, she became a punchline, her name synonymous with greed and spectacular downfall. Old friends who had once flocked to her lavish dinners now avoided her at charity galas. My father, too, called once. His message was brief. Apologetics. Almost kind. I hope you're well. Ariana. Take care of Sophie. It was the closest thing to reconciliation I ever expected. I wished him peace, wherever he'd found it. As for Sophie and me, we made our own traditions. Thanksgiving with chosen family, not relatives. Birthdays that never went uncelebrated. New Year's Eves counting down to hope instead of regret. The home we created was smaller, less polished, but warmer by far than any penthouse. If you've ever wondered what real revenge looks like, let me tell you, it's not in the ruin of your enemies. It's in the quiet triumph of building a life they can no longer touch. It's in the freedom to be generous where others hoarded, kind where others wounded. It's in knowing, deep down, that your worth was never theirs to measure. So I let go. I let the old story die. I let Victoria's voice fade into the background. And as the city moved on, so did I, no longer the invisible one. No longer the exile, but the author of my own life. Surrounded by the only family that ever truly mattered, the one I chose. But the truest peace, I learned, isn't found in money or victory. It's in forgiveness, not of those who wronged you, but of yourself, for having ever doubted that you deserved better. If you're still listening, if you've carried heartbreak through years of loyalty and silence, I hope you know you are not alone. The world is wide, and family can be found in the unlikeliest places. You just have to be brave enough to walk away from those who never saw your worth. And so, the final act of justice was simple. I built a new life, brick by careful brick, and invited only those who had earned their place within its walls. 6 months have passed since the day I signed away the penthouse keys and started over on my own terms. Sometimes, I wake before dawn and need a moment to remember that the silence in my new apartment is not a warning sign, just peace. Settling in at last. My home now sits on the edge of the city, a modest top-floor walk-up. Windows facing east so the light hits my kitchen table every morning. The walls are painted a gentle gray-blue. No longer the imposing marble and cold art that once filled my world. There's a tiny garden on the balcony. I've grown tomatoes, mint, and one stubborn rosebush. It's nothing grand, but it's mine. Every chipped mug, every photo tacked above my desk, every mismatched pillow on the couch. I start each morning with a ritual of small joys, brewing fresh coffee, reading the paper, and sometimes, if Sophie stays over, making pancakes just because we can. It is a gentle existence, far from the buzz and echo of my former life. I thought it might feel lonely, but the truth is, I have never felt less alone. Work with the Chosen Family Fund fills my days. I have become, almost by accident, a mentor to dozens of young people who remind me so much of myself at their age, unsure, unclaimed, still searching for a place where loyalty isn't a liability. I meet with social workers, plan grants, and sometimes just listen. We share meals at my table, laugh at the chaos of assembling flat-pack furniture, celebrate birthdays and small victories. We are not bound by blood, but by mutual rescue and respect. Each story I hear etches a new layer of gratitude onto my heart. There's Jenna, who put herself through college while living out of her car after being kicked out for coming out to her family. There's Michael, who survived years of manipulation from a greedy aunt and now helps others navigate financial independence. There's Sophie, who turned her own pain into advocacy for students overlooked by the same elite institutions that once prized her. We have become, in every sense, a family of our own design. Looking back, I see how easy it would have been to grow bitter, For a while, I suppose I was. Grief, after all, is not just for those we lose, but for the futures we once imagined. There were nights, especially in the beginning, when regret threatened to swallow me whole. Why did I stay so long? Why did I let their voices shape my worth? But life, I have learned, is rarely linear. It unfolds in spirals, pain leads to growth. Betrayal to clarity. Endings to beginnings. If you are listening to my story, wondering whether you are brave enough to leave a place that no longer sees you, let this be your sign, you are. My former family, for their part, exist now only as distant ripples. Victoria attempted a final lawsuit, but it fizzled when the courts reviewed the evidence. She moved to another state. Her name, a byword in certain social circles, less villain than cautionary tale. My father, Pieter, sent Sophie and me a card for Thanksgiving. He wrote that he hopes we are well and that perhaps one day we might meet without old wounds festering between us. I do not know if that day will ever come, but I do know the world does not owe us closure. Sometimes, survival is its own triumph. As for Sophie, she is my constant, a reminder that even when the roots rot, something new can grow. We make plans for the chosen family fund's next expansion. Dream of a retreat where people can rest, learn, and heal far from judgment. The fund has already sent 24 young adults to college, paid medical bills for a half dozen more, and covered rent for those in crisis. Each thank you letter, each tearful handshake, feels like a stone lifted from my chest. I have also discovered, in the quiet, a new sense of faith in people. Kindness, when given freely, has a way of returning sometimes from the most unexpected places. Old friends invite me to their weddings. Former rivals send notes of apology. Even a few of Victoria's old circle have reached out, asking how they can help. I find myself offering advice to those just starting out. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who you choose. Loyalty is precious. Don't waste it on those who can only see their own reflection. I mean it every time. If you are watching or listening to this now, I hope you will remember blood may be thicker than water, but kindness is thicker than both. If you have ever felt betrayed, invisible, or disposable, know that you are not alone. Your value is not set by those who cannot recognize it. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you, did you? Like me, I find unexpected strength. On the other side of heartbreak, I would love to hear your story. Share it below, if you wish. You never know who else needs the reminder that survival is not just possible, it's beautiful. This is not a story about revenge. Not truly. It is a story about reclamation, about letting go of old wounds, making space for joy, and learning that the greatest justice is a life lived freely, on your own terms. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that kindness and courage are worth more than any inheritance. And if you ever need a place to belong, I know that there are more of us out here than you think ready to welcome you. Not as an afterthought, but as family.